So you're all very welcome to the first of our online lessons for Leaving Certificate Accounting. You should have your pack in front of you at the moment, and use that and refer to it as you go through the lessons. And the solutions and workings to each of our questions will be included in the pack. And if you have any questions, we can hopefully follow them up in the live classes after Easter. So first of all, we're going to have a look at the examination structure. As you know, the accounting is a one-paper exam. It's a 3-hour exam. And just have a look at the structure here. We see there's 3 sections in the accounting exam. Section 1, 2 and 3. Section 1 and 2 are both financial accounting, and Section 3, cost accounting. Now, it's very important obviously that we know how many questions we must do from each section. So we see there on the right hand side, in Section 1 we must do either question 1 or 2 of the 60-mark questions. Now I would advise very carefully not to make your decision on that until you go into the exam. Be prepared to be able to do both question 1 and the 60-mark questions. If you limit yourself to one or the other, you may find yourself stuck in the exam if the question that you hope will come up doesn't actually come up. So we're very much going to be prepared for both question 1 and to be able to do the 60-mark questions if they suit us on the day. Now you'll also see that 30% of our marks will go for section 1. And so if we were to spend 48 minutes roughly on section 1 in the exam, or if we're doing 2 60-mark questions, we're going to spend 24 minutes on each. In section 2, very important part of the paper, 50% of your total marks will be in the paper in section 2. 2 questions must be attempted out of the 3, and each of them worth 100 marks each. So for this we should be spending, or aiming to spend, about 40 minutes per question. And finally, section 3, management accounting, which is a lot of students' favourite section. There are 2 questions, but we must only do 1. Each one worth 20% of your total, and roughly spend about 32 minutes on that. Now that'll leave you about 20 minutes to spare, for which you can use to read the paper at the start, wrap up at the end, and also if you have some slight run-overs, so you can go back and do a little bit extra on a particular question. But it's very important that you try and stick to those times as much as you can. And literally when you get to that time, stop and move on to the next question, even if you're not finished. Because if you tend to dwell on the question, it will cause you problems later on. So stick to the time rigidly, time yourself in the exam. Once you come to the end of it, move on to the next question, and you will have some time at the end to go back and follow up on some of the questions that you may have not finished completely. Okay? So I'm just going to go back here now, and I'm just going to have a look at the exam question analysis. So here, this is kind of a list of all of the different sections that you're going to find on the exam syllabus. We see section 1, obviously, final accounts. It could be a sole trader, a limited company, or a manufacturing company. If you look at the rate of the way these questions have been asked in the past, the likelihood is that the sole trader will be asked in 2020. That's not assured, but it is the likely suggestion. Of the other questions that could be asked in section 1, I've noted there that the likely ones are depreciation, published, and service firms. And farm accounts would be also in there as a possibility. So if I was limiting myself to what would be I most likely study towards coming up to the exam itself, I'd be looking at those 4 sections for section 1. Depreciation, published accounts, service firms, and farm accounts as 60-mark questions. In section 2, which is also financial accounting, we have our 100-mark questions. We can see there possibilities. Question 5, obviously, always interpretation of accounts. Not guaranteed, but it has been every year since the syllabus started, so I would say it'll definitely be there in 2020. Correction of errors and suspense accounts, and also incomplete records. And I'm predicting there that the reverse type, or type B, is likely to come up for incomplete records. And finally, section 3, your management accounting section. The likelihood here is production budgeting, and possibility a combination of production and cash budgeting. That hasn't been asked since back in 2011, and it's very likely that in 2020 they will ask a combination question of production and cash budgeting. And in question 8 then, we're looking at, again, a combination maybe of job costing, absorption costing, or margin costing and absorption costing. So they're the ones I'm going to focus on in this course to try and prepare us best for the exam in June. Finally, before we go on to our first section, just some of the exam pitfalls that we might look out for. Big one, of course, not attempting all 4 or 5 of the questions. You must do all of the questions that you have to do. If you leave out one of the questions, you will not be able to get the grade that you want. So make sure you do all 4 questions if you're doing question 1, and all 5 questions if you're not doing question 1. Don't choose too many questions from a particular section. Remember, you can only do 1 from section 3, 2 from section 2, and 2 from section 1, or question 1, whichever is your choice. Time mismanagement, spending too long on the question. I've already given you the suggested time for those questions. Stick to them rigidly. Stop once you reach the limit and move on to the next question. And as I said, that'll leave you 20 minutes in reserve, which you can use after you've attempted all of the 4 or 5 questions. Not completing the questions in the time allowed, obviously very important that you stick to that. Making avoidable calculation errors, so be very careful with the calculations. Have your calculator with you and use it carefully. And very important, don't ignore the theory element of the question. A lot of the questions will have a small theory section at the end. Between the whole lot of them, that could be worth 6 or 7%. If you leave them out, you will be denying yourself a good grade. So make sure you do the theory element to each of the questions. They're not looking for a huge amount of information, but they do expect you to attempt it. And very important then, have a plan about how to approach the paper and stick to the plan. And the most important thing you should do there is go in on the day knowing which question you're going to do first. Okay? Now, a lot of students will go for section C first, section 3 first, because that's a question that they can do well and do quickly. And it's very important you pick a question that you're going to get into very quickly, that you're going to give you confidence, that you'll get done in the time, and you'll be able to move on then full of confidence for the rest of the paper. So have a plan about where you're going to go first and stick to that plan. Okay? So that's just a little introduction